In this week's Parsha, Parshas Vayishlach, it might sound like a very controversial idea. But this is what the Mefarshim, the commentators, tell us. And of course, the Torah being its honest self is meant as a Torah Chaim, as a way to live our lives in a better way. And it teaches us how to live with the lessons and the mistakes and the failings that, yes, even our forefathers might have made on their tiniest, most finest way possible. And the Torah goes on at the end of this week's Parsha on the genealogy of Esav and tells us that Timnah was a Pilegesh. She wasn't allowed to be a full convert, and therefore she was only a Pilegesh as a maidservant. And from her came Amalek. She married Eliphaz, Esav's son, and out of them came Amalek. And we know that the reason why she wanted to become, she was a princess. And she wanted to give up being a princess in her kingdom and to join the Jewish people. But we didn't let her. So instead she became a Pilegesh. She said, better to be a maidservant in this nation than to be a princess in a non-Jewish nation. And the question is, if that's the case, so why would Amalek come out of such a special woman? Why would Amalek come out of her? And on some level we say it was a taina. There was something that Avram Yitzchak didn't want her to be part of, because they saw things obviously that were not so good. Maybe not altruistic, maybe she didn't mean it purely lishma, with the proper sincerity, and they didn't want her to accept her into the nation of Judaism, of Jews. But Reb Chaim Shmulevitz asks, he says, if they obviously had good reasons, so why would it be held against them? He says, but you see that through many cases, that perhaps we've given up. And we don't realize that there's potential which lies deep within, inherent, in the individual themselves. And there's potential that we wash away, that with the proper encouragement and the proper background and support, we'd be able to reach those fine, deep, positive traits that this individual has, even though from the outside it looks pretty negative. And he said on some tiny level, even though Avram and Yitzchak had very good reasons why not to accept her, perhaps with a little bit more encouragement and a little more positivity, they should have let her be Megayer, and then she wouldn't have had Amalek. Something a lot more positive would have came out. So in here, when we come to a point, when we talk about chinuch, and many of us throw up our hands in despair, Reb Chaim Shmulevitz says, look at Yitzchak. He saw Esav, according to many, rotten to the core. But yet Yitzchak gave him brachas. Yitzchak was mechazik him, and he encouraged him, even though he was doing such terrible things which Yitzchak was aware of. So the ideas that we learn from over here is that sometimes we have to make difficult decisions, as Avram and Yitzchak did, and Yaakov had to do. And throughout the millennia, many Yidden and fathers have had to make very painful decisions. Even when it came to their own children. And to ignore perhaps certain negativity, and in order to make sure it doesn't affect us, we have to distance ourselves at certain times. But at the same time, at least in order to make that decision properly, and it's so easy just to send out, and to do away with, and to negate contact. But if we realize the potential that lies inherently within every one of us, and that beauty that's there, and those positive traits that we could channel properly, then that decision will become a little more complex. And perhaps if we believe it and encourage it, it won't have to get to such a point of throwing out. But rather we can build up a little spark at a time until the flame burns that much brighter. So at a time when so many people throw up their hands and scratch their heads in despair as to what's going to be with the next generation, how are we going to manage? If we start with the brachas, by benching them, by encouraging them, by looking at the positive traits that we can, and making those sparks turn into a flame, we'll have not despair, but there'll be hope, and we'll see the beauty and the encouragement given. We'll see a new dar, even greater perhaps in certain ways than the ones previously. Have a wonderful Shabbos.